have taken over Nigeria's largest military camp, says Niger Assembly. Uh, Going banks to assist Nigerian carriers with credit facilities. That's according to the aviation minister, Osrc, there. And another story on page 2 and 7, Nasema decries mass exodus of businesses from Nigeria. NBA calls on Tinubu to end policies worsening hardship. And we have this on page 4. Oshu APC suspends Arubeshola over alleged anti-party activities. And this on page 6. Edo Catholic priest abductors demand 200 million ransom. Details of that is on page 6 of the New Telegraph this morning. F-40 aircraft. Nigeria's economy not healthy for new presidential jet, says Obi. And that's it on the New Telegraph this morning.
From the New Telegraph newspaper, let's check the Nigerian Tribune. The Nigerian blames petrol queues on marketers. Queues will disappear if marketers lift our products. Holds reserve of 500 million liters, which can sustain the country for over 12 days, he adds. NNPCL sells petrol at 1,025 naira per litre in Lagos. There's a find here in the Nigerian Tribune. Sanwo-Olu denies suing EFCC. Why I can't transfer Rivers case from Abuja to Port Harcourt? That's according to FHCCJ. You also find the suspension of the former Minister of Interior above the nameplate of the Nigerian Tribune. Says APC suspends Arubeshola. You see the picture of the governor of Ekiti State, also right there in the House of Assembly during the presentation of the budget to the House. Ekiti State Governor, Mr. Biodun Yebanji, presented the 2025 budget at the State House of Assembly complex at Ekiti. That was yesterday. Other headlines in the Nigerian Tribune: terrorists preventing electricity restoration in the north. Deputy Senate President. Find this writer, Tinubu NSA, others working to end darkness. Timothy Adegoke, appeal court reserves judgment in ex-OAU students' killing. So find state of states. How Naira devaluation exposed many states to greater financial risk. You find that story from the Nigerian Tribune and more.
From the Nigerian Tribune. On the Daily Times this morning, we have this: Nigeria loses $2.5 billion in 5 years of the non-implementation of tracking notes, says the SCN. The details of that is on page 2 of the Daily Times this morning. And on the Daily Times as well, Sanwo-Olu sues EFCC, alleging plans to arrest, prosecute him in 20. I saw kind of preempting there. Anyway, check details of this on the front page of the Daily Times of this morning. And on page 2 of the Daily Times, federal government donates 500 million naira to Nigerian Legion as Tinubu installs a military. Have this all still on page 2. Senate amends NDIC Act to safeguard bank depositors' funds and stabilize institutions. Nigeria's energy transition attracts $500 million in 10 months. You'll find details of that on page 5 of the Daily Times this morning. And so on the Daily Times on page 16, Naira for crude, Dangote highlights positive outcomes from initiative. And that will be from the Daily Times this morning.
In the Guardian newspaper, states poor IGR raises fiscal sustainability concerns. That's the bold one. You also find the graphical representation of what the figures are for some of the states. 32 states depend on FAC for 55% revenue, 14 others for 70%. So imagine. Okay, so do the maths. States IGR eats 2.4 trillion naira. Citizens grapple with uncertainty. You also find the representation of the internally generated revenues by zone in 2023. The Northwest internally generated revenue stood at 206.22 billion naira, while the Northeast has 104.35 billion naira. The North Central, 387.65 billion naira. The Southeast, 142.95 billion naira. South-South, 468.74 billion naira. While the Southwest, 1.12 trillion naira. That's the internally generated revenue from the Southwest. And that's data sourced from the National Bureau of Statistics and Budget. You find that story in The Guardian today. You also find here documentation stalls ministerial nominees screening. That was supposed to happen yesterday, but was understand that it has been postponed to later today. So we'll see how that goes and what the screening report for the 7 new nominees for the ministerial position in Nigeria. Reps query permanent secretary over 1.4 billion naira abandoned road project. You also find here petrol consumption hovers at 50 million liters per day amid deregulation, smuggling, and telcos losing billions of naira to vandalism as NCC audit shows subscription shortfall. Stakeholders hedge caution. Review of tax bill for consensus. You find the Northern Governors Forum also coming together with some of the rulers, traditional rulers in the north, speaking about the issue of the value-added tax and what the new bill would do and how it will affect the region. FG seeks regional cooperation against small arms, IED threats. Find the picture of the Inspector General of Police right there beside that headline. Nigeria, US set up early warning situation room for conflict resolution. That's it from the Guardian newspaper. You find more where you grab a copy for today.
From the Guardian, let's check the Punch Sports Extra this morning. Lookman, tips for unplanted January exit. It's the sport extra details you have on page 6. World Cup quest against Kiwis. And we have this Zank bags dubious for Joshua rematch. Details of that you find on page 2 of the Punch Sports Extra. And on page 7, Eagles were held hostage, insists Iguavon. That's the incidents between the Super Eagles and of Nigeria and the Libyan counterparts. All right, and we still have this on page 5, yes, of Punch Sports Extra. Devil's hand tends hard sack ultimatum. Unkoko not for sale. Find details of that on page 5 as well. On page 2, Oshodi emerges ATTF president. And on the world of volleyball soared Yusum maintains unbeaten streaks. We have details of that and much more from the Punch Sports Extra this morning. And with that, we call it a wrap on the newspaper's headlines this morning. We take a short break now. When we return, we'll be taking the discussion for today, and you don't want to miss out on it. Stay with us.
Leadership is not a package where I give you the package. Leadership comes from what you do, how you do it, how you live, what have you acquired in terms of your training, your experience, your track record, and all that. And what I'm saying is that the young people must strive. They shouldn't expect it to be a parcel delivered by DHL to them. And they must know that nothing comes just for nothing. You work for it.
glad to know you are still with us on AM today. Yes, just as we promised, while we go on that break, that when we return, we'll be, having a discussion for the day. And yes, today we're going to be mirroring ourselves. Most of the time, as journalists, as broadcasters, we mirror the society. We are the ears and the eyes of the people and also the government. But today we'll be looking at ourselves in the mirror, and the discussion is focused on enhancing journalism through foundational training. Our guest for today, because our guest, not one of us to say, our guest for today is Mr. Babatunde Sunday Kolawole. It's nice to have you on this seat, and please take position on that seat.
Well, it's quite unusual. It's also disturbing.
Why should it? What's disturbing?
Disturbing because, I always love to be on that side. So finding myself here today, well, it's an opportunity, and I thank you very much for having me. And I was so shocked hearing my full name for the first time in your mouth.
Oh, okay. All right, let's get to the business of the day. As sometime last week, you brought to the public, published a book, and it was unveiled to the public, Emerging Journalist's Companion. I think some time ago, even on the show, we've talked about the infiltration of the media. We've talked about the emergence of different media outlets, from what it used to be before. For instance, in the whole of the state some years back, it was just our corporation, but today you can name like 5, 6 or more, media outfits, broadcast outfits in the state, for instance. And then with the establishment of these outfits, new presenters and broadcasters, people on the field. You can call them greenhorns and what have you. And sometimes listening to some of them speak, they wonder, are we still on the same job and all of that? Well, let me ask, what inspired your writing, Emerging Journalist Companion? Of course, you're a practicing journalist, but why do you think you need to do something for the emerging journalists?
You see, Shade, it said that what is worth doing at all is worth doing well. Well, the inspiration is from my experience mentoring and tutoring young journalists, as I always like to call them, students of mass communication from different universities, polytechnics, and other institutions of higher learning. And I discovered that there is the need to really solidify the foundation for practical orientation. There is the aspect of theoretical training. That's what you find just within the 4 walls of the classroom, or if you like, lecture halls. And when that happens, it's theoretical. You expect that, yes, they will know the things written in textbooks and all of that. But how about the practical orientation of the job? How about the blow-by-blow account of how news is written? How about the ethics and the do's and don'ts of the studio life? How about many of the standards, the code of the NBC code, for instance, for broadcasters, and the ethics that lawyers really know, so that they don't fall victim of violating these laws and regulations? That was why I sat and I looked at it. Look, there's a need to bring these practical experiences over the years to the doorstep of students and young journalists. And I looked at it, the first port of call of anyone, be you a young journalist or a student on internship, is the newsroom, for instance, as a news person, as the programs department as a program person, and many other areas like that. So the first port of call, if you are in the news arena, is the newsroom. And the first thing you would encounter would be the editorial meeting. So what exactly is the content of that editorial meeting? What are they actually dealt with? Looking at what should be the orientation of the students as they are coming in. So that, these are students that just go to class, go back home and all of that. They're not coming to a formal meeting setting. So they should know what they should be expecting. So all of this inspired me to put together the 5-chapter book,
All right, I'm looking at the book, The Emerging Journalist and all of that. And from the editorial meeting and some of the chapters that I just glanced through, would you say there is a gap between the school experience and the on-the-field experience? I mean, is this book filling a kind of gap between the school and the field?
Every research work is about filling a gap. That's why the most important by your engagement. And you've said it, there is a concerning gap between theoretical orientation and practical orientation. And if efforts such as these are not put into place, we will continue to have such concerning gap. For instance, it is out of place for a teacher of mass communication, for instance, to be teaching with the experience of 1982, or teaching with the experience of 1995, or teaching with the experience of the year 2000. This is 2024, so to say. So we must really bridge that concerning gap if indeed we will have a reliable future for the profession. And there is a need for us to, like the elders will say, the festival you're doing, or the oracle, or the deity you're serving, that you do not make your children to know the nitty-gritty of it, will perish one day. And so that is why we're letting them understand that, look, it's not just about what you are told that, okay, the 5 W's and it goes beyond that. Let's tell you this: if you meet yourself in this kind of a situation, this is what you do. If something affects your father, for instance, if your father is a politician and you are a reporter, you're sent to cover that thing. You must not cover up anything. The worst you could do is to recuse yourself, as they say in the law, so that you know that there is already what they call a clash of interest. So many other things like that that readers will find useful in this. So to answer your question straight, of course, yes, there is a gap that this book has come to fill.
I'm imagining that, just like you mentioned, there is a gap to be filled, but when you also look at that gap itself, it should not, perhaps it's not about the students themselves coming into a new terrain.
Mm-hmm.
Could it also be about, trying to also, in a way, change the narrative? Because when you ask a lot of persons now in Nigeria, there are also question marks about the practice of journalism in the country and how well ethics are being upheld by those who are said to be practitioners in the media space. So aside from trying to introduce the students to a new terrain, it's also trying to get them to prepare their mindset to say, look, journalism, perhaps you might have had experiences or interests or discussions that a lot of persons are even studying mass comm, but they do not really want to practice. So it's also about telling them what journalism should be in itself without any form of tainting in any way.
I agree with you, and that's why the book is not just for journalism students alone. I mean, mass communication students alone. It's also for those who are already on the job. For instance, you're just getting into the job, you should understand the nitty-gritty of what exactly the job is all about. So I agree with you. In the years past, you find just a few media organizations. Today, journalism is fast becoming an all-comer affair, and we cannot put our hands to continue to see journalism as an all-comer affair. And that is why the people who come to journalism must understand the rules and regulations governing the profession. They must understand that journalism is not an all-comer affair. Because you have a phone or you have a camera somewhere doesn't make you a journalist. You must have the experience, you must have the training. And that is why nobody can jettison the part of the university training, the polytechnic training, or what have you. But with that, there must also be the adherence to rules. It's not just about the students, it's also about those of us on the job. There must be the need for us to go again and look at what exactly are we doing wrong? What exactly are the gaps we must fill by our actions and our inactions? Because sometimes inactions are also a way of correcting a particular trend. So the book also has a lot to do with people who are currently on the job. However, in the coming months, by the grace of God, I'll also be working on something concerning ethics and standards in journalism. But you see, people must come to understand that journalism is not the profession where you're coming to say you want to make money and all of that. First, you must understand that it's about the defense of the truth, no matter whose ox is God. And when that is settled in your mind, you will not compromise the standards and the ethics of the job. And that is why young journalists must understand that you are first servant of the people. Whether you're working in a government organization or not, Whether you're working in an organization owned by a particular person or another person, you must know that you're first a journalist before working in that organization. And so, just like the first section of the Constitution of Nigeria says, that when there's any other law that contradicts the law of Nigeria, to the extent of that contradiction, that other law stands null and void. And so you must know that any other consideration that negates the principles, ethics, and regulations of journalism as a professional stands null and void. So we have a lot to still adjust. These are days you find quacks creeping into many professions, including journalism.
I was going to say that.
And so we must not fold our arms. Kudos to the NUJ in Ondo, it had to set up a task for that. Look, we cannot fold our arms and see quacks just everywhere. You just brand one microphone and then you're calling yourself a journalist, linking people. Let me give you an instance. I was at a party last weekend. I was a guest there, and I sat down and somebody just came and invited one of the persons who were together at the received seats that people call high table. I just signaled to the person. I said, "Don't honor the invitation." So the man said, "Sorry, I'm not going." I just said, "By the way, I'm not supposed to let this man go. Come. Where did you say you're from?" The Orange FM. What's your name? What's the name of your head of news and current affairs? What's the name of your head of reportorial? Who are you? And I said, "I've heard you." And I said, "Look, it's the profession of quacks and infiltrators."
Even as we're looking forward to cleansing the profession from quacks and infiltrators, but some would say that journalism, broadcasting in general, it's a world of talent, and sometimes talent topples the.
It's another thing to be certificated.